Ladies and gentlemen, please silence your phones and hush your babies. The show is about to start.
I offer my personal welcome to this
Nemo
and Cole conference
halftime
show.
Hi everyone, Nemo here. Welcome to the Nemo and Co conference halftime show. Today is the Sunday morning session of General Conference, and I am joined by the lovely ladies from 21st Century Saints, but I'll roll them out in a moment, because first we have to check the scores on the doors for Jesus, Joe or Russell. Jesus 34, Joe 8, Russell 40. Oh dear. Okay, so Russell M. Nelson is still in the lead on this Palm Sunday. Ready for Holy Week, preparing for Easter Sunday. They keep talking about how significant Palm Sunday is. They're trying to get Christian nomenclature all up inside this conference. And yet, they're still quoting Russell M. Nelson more than they're quoting Jesus Christ. So, to help me dissect exactly what's been going on in this session, including an absolute belter of a talk by Russell M. Nelson himself, the first time he's spoken in the entire conference, which maybe is showing his age, I'm joined by the lovely ladies of 21st Century Saints, Ruth and Jane. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Should I say guys, gals? It's fine. It's fine.
I'm slightly bent. I can go with gender neutral or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, we can go for all of it. Right. So, as I was saying, that we got recognition that today is Palm Sunday. People from Oakes himself, as he was introducing the session, and throughout we got people making reference to it being Palm Sunday, mentions of Holy Week. It's really, this entire conference has been full of that. Before we get to Todd Christopherson and the opening prayer, what were your thoughts on the session overall, ladies?
Oh,
You go first, Ruth.
oh well, so we had a token lady. She got a little bit teary, and I just felt like there was a lots of subtext there. There was lots of having a little digs at people on social media, having lots of references to Satan. I think if we did a bar chart for Satan, he would get quite a lot of shout outs this conference session. So, so yeah, it's nice to include all of the family members in there, isn't it? But yeah, there was a tone. There was a definite tone to this session.
Yes, I think so. Jane?
I rate fairly high on the TBM meter in these contexts quite a lot. So I am looking for something in conference. This isn't just to sort of say what things annoyed me about it. I am looking to be fed. And this, like all other conference sessions, not give me a lot to work with, people. So for the most part, that was how I felt. And then we will end up with the roller coaster ride that is President Nelson. It was mostly miss. Hit and miss.
Yeah. I mean, it was great. We'll get onto it later, but it was absolutely great for reinforcing the idea that Russell Nelson should get his Peace Prize. Because there was big themes on reducing contention and being peacemakers. One of the quotes that kept coming up was Russell M. Nelson's quote from about a year ago, talking about how we should all be peacemakers, when he decided he wanted to talk about making peace without actually directly referring to the Ukrainian conflict. That time when the prophecy and revelator refused to name what was going on in the world. So yeah, they were all quoting him for that. The opening prayer is significant. Do either of you ladies know why?
No, I do not.
It was James R. Rasband, who is the first cousin once removed of Ronald A. Rasband.
Okay, I saw the name, but I didn't realise there was a relationship.
So they are related. So James R.
They're
Rasband's
Mormons.
granddad.
They're all related.
Yeah, they are.
They're
But
all
these guys are
related.
close. They're closely related.
Okay.
James R. Rasband's granddad is Ronald A. Rasband's uncle.
Okay.
So they're not too far removed at all. If James R. Rasband was the generation up, they'd just be straight cousins.
Okay.
So there you go. But then we got Todd Christopherson, who came straight in, talked about Holy Week. Boom. As did the prayer, actually. James R. Rasband mentioned Holy Week as well. It keeps coming up. How can we achieve unity in the church in an extremely contentious world? Ladies, your thoughts on this talk?
Yeah, so there's no he said, how can it be achieved? There's no bond, no free, no male, no female, which is a great shout out, I think, to the trans community within the church and the, gender fluidity within the church. So we've got it from Todd Christopherson that's all now A-OK. But I thought this was one of those talks where this was a subtle undercurrent of don't chat back to your leaders. We're at the head, you are the members, literally in the body analogy, and there should be no.
I called it the submit to church leaders talk.
It was all a little bit, submit.
Absolutely. Because he's talking about how we are too diverse to come together in any way other than through Jesus. So he's making it like this big daunting challenge, but Jesus can make it work, which is great for a church that didn't allow black people to hold the priesthood until 1978. Jane, your thoughts?
Well, that quote really stuck out to me because fairly recently we had the quote from President Oakes, who was talking about how Jesus didn't ask us to be diverse. He asked us to be one. I felt like this was a sort of softening of, let's explain what that really means. We are diverse and we're coming together. So I think there was a bit of being on the pulse there. I mean, you see there was lots of talk about Palm Sunday and Holy Week. I was hearing probably more talk about contention than Palm Sunday. I'm not quite getting how, I don't know, maybe a day of celebration or preparation, maybe even advocacy, sort of, things about table tipping type Jesus stuff. No, we got lots of let's be one and be contentious. And Palm Sunday wasn't really about that, right? He uses these examples of the city of Enoch, the early New Testament church, the early restored church. And I think there's a little bit of idealizing what that was actually like, because every time there has been a context of faith, there's division. Everyone interprets it differently because they're living it differently. So his idea that Missouri or Zion failed because the church weren't united, the members weren't united. So it was kind of on us that Zion didn't really work, and not because there were these real problems with leadership. That I think we're going to see that come out again in a later talk. This we have problems with leadership, but we don't talk about that because actually you're the problem if you don't be obedient.
And because he was talking as well about how, and I forget who he quoted. He quoted
Romney.
Romney, about how if everyone was listening to the Spirit, then the world conflicts wouldn't happen. But people that believe they're listening to the Spirit have been known to commit acts of violence in the church. You only have to go to Nephi, who said he was listening to the Spirit when he chopped off Laban's head. You then go to people like the Lafferty brothers, who believed they were listening to the promptings of the Spirit and committed horrible crimes and murders. So listening to the Spirit isn't a surefire way to stop violence.
Not at all. And in fact, I jotted down that Romney quote. It wasn't one that I knew, but he said, yield to Jesus and that equals peace. And then yielding to Satan will reap worldwide contention. And I just thought, Jesus isn't, not everyone's Christian, but not everyone who's not Christian equals Satan and contention. That's a really very biased take on the world, to say it's Jesus or Satan. Across the whole world. I thought that was spoken from a place of huge privilege. And it is so polarizing. So at the same time we're having these don't be contentious, we're having these hugely polarizing quotes being used to prop that up.
Jane looks like she wants to push back.
I only kind of, because
go for it.
I like to live in the question. I like to live in that grey area. But if we were to give them the grace, which there is none of in this talk, there's no room for grace. This is about control. So if you are on the one hand being led by the bad thing, by Satan, by maybe other faiths or secular Buddhism or something may call it, being led by ego or self, compared to this higher God, a higher you, the highest version of yourself. So if we're talking about that spectrum, there can be benefits in looking at it that way. But the problem is and he's using the war references, this war between body and spirit, with the ideal being that we have dominance over the body. And it's not, for me, I find it really, really unhelpful. Mental health is something that we talk about a lot in our home. I have OCD. My thoughts are not me. They are a completely separate thing that happens to me, that I experience. And if we're constantly trying to control our thoughts, the thing that Mormonism misses so often is, if you're looking for is to keep coming back to focus on the holy, controlling thoughts just doesn't work. It just doesn't. We can't think our way into heaven. And so, but in the same respect, grace just doesn't come in. So it's very, what are we doing? What are you? If you are aligned with the Holy Ghost and your spirit, everything's going to be fine. And if you don't quite get there, then that's what repentance is for.
Yeah. I think the next part of it, where he talked about unity, we cannot be one unless we all submit to the authority of God. Well, who are the authority of God? Who does
that
mean?
That was a I am the law type moment, wasn't it? That was that means us.
Yeah.
And he reinforces that with the B.H. Roberts thing.
Yes.
Okay.
If we want to go there.
Well, for people who haven't seen the conference, you're going to have to exactly and properly explain what he did, because it was very, very bad.
Yeah. So he starts by talking about how B.H. Roberts in 1895 decided to be a candidate for Congress but didn't get permission from the Brethren, and implies so therefore lost the race. He blamed the president of the church at the time for making comments against his running because he was upset that he hadn't given permission. And so he blamed him for his loss, and kind of got a little upset with them and was critical of them in some interviews. And so this whole thing flew up, and then he gets pulled into a room for a conversation, and perceived slights and offences were all resolved, and he went back to being faithful. How close to the truth is that, ladies?
That's how it was presented.
That's how it was presented.
So
what else was going on at the time?
Well, I mean, the first thing that, let's just be my first piece of context is, we're not going to mention. He made a kind of funny joke. Things were different then. You don't really have to ask permission if you want to be president. That would just be silly. What they did was they had no authority over whether he should do that or not, but they felt like they did, and they actively started a whisper campaign against him, the prophet of the church. And he felt that this was so dishonorable. This is the church. You're doing this in the name of Jesus Christ, and this is the behavior I get to expect from you, my leaders. And so he was outraged, and he spoke up about it because he had integrity. So that's my bit of context.
Ruth?
Yeah, and I think as well, for me, B.H. Roberts holds a place in my heart for being one of the few people who spoke truth to power and said, there's a lot about our history that doesn't tie with the narrative that we're portraying. And that's me putting it lightly. And the fact that he stayed aligned with the church, I think, is an interesting and maybe an interesting topic for another day, and maybe would speak more to how dangerous it would have been to not be aligned with the church.
And it's a vast oversimplification of his position, because if you do get a chance to read this book, you'll show that his relationship with the church was not one of kowtowing and bowing down. He was put out to pasture several times. He was sent out of the way to be a mission president in New York because he was causing trouble around problems with the Book of Mormon. So this book wasn't published until after his death, because it couldn't really be. So that should tell you everything you need to know about his relationship with the church. So and the church will try and tell you he died faithful. He died with a very complicated relationship with the church.
Exactly. And so I think the fact that they're throwing him into a conference, it's so clever. It's sort of, it's PR working in the background, machinations. Let's have some quotes. Let's use B.H. Roberts' name. So if you Google search B.H. Roberts, it won't just take you through to a history or a narrative that in any way will rock your sesame. It'll take you through to this really inane talk, and it will talk about him in terms of he needed to sort himself out and needed to, sort out his contention with the brethren and put himself back on course, and he did. Good old B.H. Roberts. And I think from a managing the information that's out there point of view, this was a move that they did on purpose to muddy the water for those people that might have heard the name B.H. Roberts and are wondering, who was he? Where does he fall into Mormon history?
Jane, your thoughts?
I'm going to say something about B.H. Roberts in a second,
Please.
But can I just say that the way you slid that book back in was one of the dirtiest things I've ever seen in my life. That was just, yeah. Anyway, that was a loving caress.
You made him blush, Jane.
I don't know why I've gone so red.
What?
That's such a strange thing to say.
This
That's
is
a
because
man
it's
who
going to
can
be a
handle the
YouTube
volume.
short.
Ooh.
All of the TikTok thirst tweets about how Nemo handles his books.
Oh my goodness. Tanner is going to start a thirst account if he's watching this.
Sad is already starting it right now in the background. B.H. Roberts, yeah. I mean, we've gone from he is saying B.H. Roberts submitted to the authority of God, and he's made it look like, I mean, I don't know, even in the comments, I mean, B.H. Roberts did not leave the church. He was saying what he thought. He was doing what he did best, and he was he had these not just super nuanced beliefs, but if something was a load of crap, he would say it in a scholarly, academic way. He did his homework. He spoke about it. It made people feel really uncomfortable. And the idea that somehow at the end of this talk, he climbed back into his box, submitted to authority, and they all lived happily ever after. He didn't get excommunicated. Well, no, he lived the way he always lived. And the people who were very much in the wrong in this were the leaders of the church. The repenting that needed to be done was from them. But, hey, B.H. Roberts, again, you're just continuing to be a folk hero, and he's now modelling repentance in the church. But it was done in such a underhanded way. I was actually just delighted that we're hearing a talk where they even mention his sacred name. More of that.
But then it's like when... It's like when Quentin L. Cook gets up, holds this book, The Life of Heber C. Kimball by Orson F. Whitney. He holds it up, and he's like, Helen Mar Kimball's my great aunt. And you're like, he just said Helen Mar Kimball. No, he didn't. And you know that to those that know the story, that is, okay, he's mentioned her. But to other people, it's, oh, I wonder who that is. He's mentioned her, so it must be fine. It's that light inoculation. I don't know if there's anything else to say about this talk. We can never disagree with anger or contempt for one another. That puts Holland out to pasture, I'm pretty sure. Unity does not require sameness, but it does require harmony. This talk also seemed like not only was it to try and get people to submit to the church leaders, it was also trying to maybe heal some division within the church. I think they're keenly aware that the church is fairly divided politically in the US. And so I think there's been a number of talks over the past couple of years trying to heal some of those divisions. So I think this may have been an attempt to do that as well. Should we go on to Camille N. Johnson?
Yeah.
And The Man with the Palsy? A story which has been told. It was mentioned by Randy Funk, James W. McConkie, and Amy A. Wright in 2022. In 2021, it was mentioned by Brent Nielsen and George Becerra. In 2019, Michelle Craig. 2018, Matthew L. Carpenter. 2017, Dieter Uchtdorf. 2015, Jorge F. Zabalos. 2014, Chi Hong Wong and M. Russell Ballard. And 2013, Craig Corden and Timothy Dykes. There's a story they love to bring out at conference, apparently, because in the past 10 conferences, it's been mentioned I don't know how many times. Thank you to Peter Bleakley for doing that little bit of research for me during the session. Your thoughts on this talk? Should we go with Ruth first and then Jane?
So I've been a primary president. I bet you have, Jane. You've been in primary Nemo.
No, I
was
do
in
not
primary
do
once.
primary. No.
How many times have we used that backpack analogy, and we've brought along a little Dora the Explorer backpack and thrown some cans of beans in it, and oh, look how it's getting heavier and now it's getting lighter when you've repented. Oh, I found it trivial. This is the only woman that has spoken in this conference session, and she's talking to us in her primary voice, in her pastel colours, and she's talking to us like we're children in an insipid talk that I probably helped a 6-year-old do back in primary when, you know, I was there. I just found it a little bit insulting, and it was tired and it was redundant. And I also don't like the fact that palsy is linked to sin, that in that story that is given, in that analogy, then his faith heals him, and she's linking that to Jesus forgave his sins and then he got better. Like having a chronic illness or having a medical condition is because of sin. We've let go of that, I thought, but apparently not, because we're still trotting out that story.
Well, because scripturally there was a thing that was part of the cultural understanding. You know, not in this instance, but you know, the part where who has sinned, this man or his parents, that there is a fault. He's done something in the pre-existence, or you know, there has been a cause to this. So it, you know, and it was acknowledging for us to bring it into the 21st century. Okay, this is I suppose a little aside before I get into the context of our talk. As you know, I hate the criticism of the primary voice, because I feel like, I know we're all talking about, it drives us all crazy, right? It just does. The primary voice is the way women get listened to in the church. When I speak to someone in leadership, my voice, my tone, my everything, it just changes, because that's the only way we have any credibility. It doesn't surprise me that women are standing using that voice. I would like to see us feeling more empowered that we can leave that behind, but also we've been trained in using that voice. That's how we communicate to our children. That's how we soothe. That's how we calm. And also it's the cadence of where you're brought up. What I appreciate is being more specific about what is it about the voice, because we can't ask for women's voices and yet criticize primary voice. So could we be more specific? What is really frustrating? And by the way, this is not to say that primary voice isn't a pain in the ass and really annoying. It is. It switches us all off. It is designed to patronize, make you feel comfortable and safe. But it's
also designed to make men not feel threatened by what they're saying.
It is. Yes. 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
It's to make it palatable for me, and that's why it annoys me. It's one of the reasons it annoys me. Is that
and you should feel annoyed.
I feel like they're pandering to me, and actually I want to hear women speak to me as an authority figure, because that's what they are. I don't want them to kind of pander to me like that.
You are absolutely right.
She's the World Relief Society president. So it's not just for members of the church, that she is the highest it gets in the church, or for the world, for women. She is who Jesus Christ has chosen for the women of the world to listen to. And that's what they got.
So women in the church use it both as a shield and as a sword, because it manipulates and it controls and it helps and it holds us back. So, but the specifics of what it is about that voice, it can be an inappropriate cadence where you should be sounding, letting go of the breathiness, feeling more controlled and more poised, use your diaphragm more, just things like that that are really simple, that you can work on these things, is I guess all I'm saying. And part of the reason why I feel already when a woman starts to come up, I know that already I'm going to hear most of the comments, rather than the content, will be about how she speaks and what she looks like. So how many, tweets, how many posts on social media do we see speculating as to whether she's had cosmetic surgery or not? What type of how she looks, how she's aged. The fine lines or wrinkles will clearly mean that she's had, not had Botox or whatever it looks like. And so it just, I'd like to push all that to the side, because she wasn't giving me a huge amount to work with. And I think it's because I'm wrestling with this need for food. I actually ended up enjoying a lot of what she said. I liked how she was bringing in the mission of Relief Society to the relief that the Savior brings, Jesus Christ is relief, the metaphorical backpack. Oh yeah, we could have done better. You could have worked harder for that. She was women are burdened, and so we were moving to those types of metaphors. But there was this moment where she very powerfully talked about the role of Jesus Christ in her life, and she'd said something along the lines of, "I don't need." I want to. It was very controlled. That's the voice I want to hear more. She talked about being covenant keepers with the Saviour's relief. My problem really with it was, you're talking about relief and we have all of these resources. I feel like this is just trauma dump Sunday for Jane. I want to hear about humanitarian aid. I want to hear about how Relief Society can fulfill the mission it was originally set up to do. I want to hear you talk about the specifics of that and not the warm, fuzzy stuff that it's irrelevant. I get soothed constantly. That you're talking about the person with the palsy. Can you talk to me about chronic illness without, tell me what that looks like. Tell me what it looks like when there is no cure, but you don't turn it into an Einstein story. I wear the bruises on my arm of my son, who when he's melting down, it hurts. It bloody hurts. And it is the most wonderful, empowering experience. And both I and my son relate more to Jesus Christ through the pain in those experiences rather than rushing us through it to, it's okay because, it wasn't really sin and Jesus is going to comfort you. No, there's something darker and yet more beautiful and more powerful that you can give us if you just give us that content, just reach a little bit more. Yeah.
And it would help humanize these people as well, to hear the specifics, to hear the actual human experience, not just a bad thing happened and then we got through it. It's like, well, go on, Ruth.
No, I was just going to say, I'm in a different place spiritually to you, Jane, and I get that. I totally get that. But one thing that I jotted down that she wrote, and bearing in mind, and I know your circumstances, and I know what you go through, and all she wanted to talk about was that yoking to Christ. Now, on a spiritual level, I get that, but when she then says, your burdens are made light, and you will submit cheerfully, you'll get comfort and deliverance and patience. If you are living with somebody who has a condition that means that they will have meltdowns and might be physical, or you're living with someone with a chronic illness, or you're living with someone who's got a life-limiting condition, I don't need to submit cheerfully. I want to rage against the machine. I want to know what you're bringing to the table here, lady. And I don't want to have a metaphor about a backpack for the millionth time, and to be told in a breaking, teary voice with no actual real tears, a dictionary definition of what relief is. Give me something real.
Yeah, and that's the beauty. That's what I need from the palsy story. Tell me about the palsy. Tell me about, reach into that experience. And for those of us who are not going to be healed from that, talk to me about, you're the Relief Society president. Talk to the overlooked. Talk to the invisible, the people who are, not able to reach out and fix you, or you're not able to find Christ in that. Talk to them, because they're the people who are thirsting and need to hear what it is you're trying to say, and would possibly be quite appreciative of hearing a primary, level talk.
And I don't need you to be cheerful about it, Jane. I don't need, as somebody observing you going through that, I don't need you to slap a smile on your face and tell me it's okay, I've got Jesus, I'm yoked to Jesus. I need you to tell me what you need from me, and to be real. And I'm not able to fix it, but I'm able to walk alongside you, whether that's religion that's brought me to that space or not. And I feel like she's there speaking for women across the world. And instead of being a voice of This is a troubled time. These are the things that are happening across the world. These are the things that we can do. These are the ways that we can show up. She's going to give me a backpack metaphor, and I just find it just so disheartening.
Yeah, I don't need to know, like, I don't need to go through the old French and the Latin. I love a good etymology as much as the next person. But we've had in this conference, we've had Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. This word X comes from Y, meaning it's like, great, cool. But how did that help you when you were suffering? I remember I used to have conversations with my mother when I was younger. She said, oh, the prophets and apostles have all had very difficult lives. You know, the typical go-to is Dieter Uchtdorf was a refugee, so on, so on. But Russell M. Nelson was a very successful man, and he had difficulties and challenges, just like everyone that's getting a successful career. And while that could make them relatable, they never go there. Because for some reason, and this is the key to the problem with the church, and I'll say this just before we move on to Suarez, the key of the problem with the church, I find, is that there always has to be a happy ending. There always has to be faith promoting. What faith promoting means is positive, and this is the attitude we need to get out of as a church. This is why B.H. Roberts is actually so important, is that what he brought up wasn't positive, but it was important. This whole idea of, oh, well, if it's contentious, if it's a difficult conversation, then we shouldn't be having it. Wrong. Absolutely wrong.
If it makes me feel uncomfortable in my belly, it can't be of God.
Can't be right.
No, it is right. It is the truth. It is the actual history. It is the actual narrative that we need to face. It is a life event that somebody's going through, and it's not going to make you feel comfortable.
And it's
real.
It's all part and parcel of the infantilization of church members.
Yeah.
Treat them as though they can't deal with real difficult conversations, because you have to give everyone milk before meat, and no one ever gets the meat. We never get to the substance, to the heart of the issue, which brings us on beautifully to Ulysses Suarez, who also didn't get to the heart of the issue. He just made some vague comments about social media, and then he said he talks about personal attacks and heated disputes, and I hope he was talking to Des Nats as much as anyone. Because, you know, there's a group of people within this church who are just as guilty as some of the kind of the more extreme members of the ex-Mormon community at getting personal, attacking people, being, inciting violence online. There's all this bad stuff going on, and it's not the baddies in the outside world. Again, we need to get to the dark nitty-gritty. They need to say, there are members of this church who are doing things they shouldn't be doing. Stop it. Stop it now.
Yeah.
Your thoughts, ladies.
He said the adversary tactics is to stir up enmity, destroy character, criticising, ridiculing, slandering. And I just thought, Holland, Wilcox, who is he talking to? Because if the adversary is getting a shout out there, and I've seen that in action. I've seen people being slandered and ridiculed by Brad Wilcox. Other churches, people who think they're Christians, but they're just playing at it. You know, I've seen him do that. I've seen Holland speak at a public venue and try and destroy a young man's character and accuse him of things. And I just feel like you're absolutely right. And I'm happy to be called onto the carpet if you feel like I've attacked somebody. I'll say, yeah, I said this. That was me. I said it, and I believe in what I've said. But there is some people who are active believing members in positions of great authority who are doing this on purpose, day in, day out, and being backed up by the system.
Yeah, it's not great. Jane?
Well, you guys are thinking Des Nat and Holland and Wilcox. I was thinking fear, because that's what they specialize in. I was wondering if this was something that they would be applying, who specialize in the phrase he uses as personal attacks. I had wondered if this talk would have hit differently or been more impactful if I felt like I hadn't already heard it a million times just in conference alone. We're hearing the word contention again. It seems to be the theme that's running through today. But something really interesting for me starts to happen with the word contention. He breaks it down. Contention is always presented as making us feel uncomfortable and getting into arguments, stoking up some kind of conflict. He brings it in a context of verbally bullying people. And I'm really interested in that, because my assumption is you're going to be talking about just making us feel uncomfortable. But actually, if you're calling out what contention really looks like, and we're going to see this again later on, it was a talk that didn't really come to anything. It was almost good content. But yeah, don't be horrible to people. That was it.
Don't be horrible to people. And you think charity is giving away money? No, don't get that into your head. Charity is an attribute of Christ. We don't want you thinking charity means giving money, because otherwise then we can't claim to be charitable, because we don't do it. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. They do it, but they don't do enough of it, in my opinion. They clearly think they are doing enough, and some government institutions clearly think they're doing enough because they're keeping their tax-exempt status. But for how long, who knows, at this rate. But he did... Go on.
Sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. He did say something that I found positive, and I want to find some positive in this conference. He said, we can transform ourselves into supportive people, understanding, forgiving, looking for the best in others. And I've got to say that I have seen the best. That's been my experience of people on the spectrum of adjacent to or walking away from Mormonism, and it's a really diverse community. Me and Jane, I think, exemplify that, sitting in the space that we sit together on a regular basis, is that we support and challenge and love and fiercely defend each other against anything else, but we can wrestle with that sort of difficult conversations as well. That is the experience of people when they can be real. And unfortunately, the church construct doesn't allow people to be real. It allows people, it unfortunately builds people that judge each other. And I noticed someone in the comments saying, but getting drunk and having, children, falling pregnant out of wedlock or whatever is the scary side of things. Most of my family, my husband's side of the family, born and raised in the church. My side of the family, not. My cousins, my loved ones, didn't go off the rails because they weren't raised Mormon. They are good people doing good things. My neighbours are good people doing good things, making good life choices. We get scared in the church to think it's a black and white choice. You're either a Mormon or you are this hideous extreme of Satanism. And in all honesty, most people who have stepped away from the church are living a more authentic, kind, generous, thoughtful life than ever lived in the church. That was my experience anyway.
Okay. Can I talk to when he said, with what judgment you judge, you will be judged? Yeah. Can any of you think of what judgment we are judged by the church? The church kind of tends to judge us on, are we being honest? Are we paying our tithing? Are we, doing the things that we should be doing? Are we keeping the commandments? Let's stick to that honest one for the moment. So the church should be judged with the judgment with which they judge others. So when we judge the church for not being honest, that's okay. That's fine. Because we're simply judging them with the judgment with which they judge us as their members and the world at large.
Yeah.
That's how I view that. What are your thoughts?
Jane?
It was my takeaway from the talk, I guess, that he made it really clear the way we measure if you're a Christian, if you are following Christ, is how you treat other people. And most Christians around the world, I think, would agree with that. And unfortunately, as someone who tries to attend church, as someone who's engaged with it, it's one of the biggest reasons people leave is because they're just not finding very many Christian people at church. There is a lot of judgment. We sign up for judgment. We the bishop is the common judge. We have this expectation that someone is going to judge us.
Yeah.
So I'm going to now tell everyone about these lovely candles, if that's all right. They make my studio smell wonderful. They're from the EXMO Candle Company. The link is in the description. So if you like the idea of that, if you like the idea of a candle that says you're speaking for God and another one that says you're speaking as a man, go check them out.
Can we have speaking as a woman?
Yes, speaking as a woman would be a great candle. And the other things you can do while you're down in the description, you could become a monthly donor if you like these sorts of things. You could like this video because that costs you nothing. And you could subscribe so that you make sure you see the next one. Like, comment, subscribe, all that nonsense. Right, I've sold my soul to Satan. Let's carry on.
I love how much you hate doing that.
Oh, but I love doing it at the same time because EXMO candles are great. And I'm working on a candle with them. And I really want it to be called This Candle Smells Like Nemo. But I feel like that's... Yeah. So we'll come up with a name. People come up with a name in the comments. The Nemo candle is on its way at a time to be determined. Let's talk about Yasuhiko Yamashita. I believe he was Japanese. He talked about, having his patriarchal blessing in Japanese. He basically got up and admitted that there'd been a scheduling error, didn't he? He got up and said, my friend spoke about patriarchal blessings, but can I speak about them too? It's almost like they both got there, looked at each other's talks and gone, I guess we're both doing patriarchal blessings. Patriarchal blessings are back on the menu, which is interesting. They kind of never really fell out of vogue, but they're on the menu. So, ladies, what are your thoughts on the fact that patriarchal blessings have had 2 talks this conference?
Yeah, buy one get one free on patriarchal blessings. So for me, I think they're really trying to anchor, like they did with primary and youth, starting now. Going back at a younger age, you're going into youth. I think they're trying to anchor patriarchal blessings at a younger age. And I jokingly said to you guys before we got started, they're going to be giving it out when the baby's being blessed at this rate, aren't they? I think because we know that patriarchal blessings are a great way for people to kind of go, well, I've got to do all of these things because this is God speaking to me personally. This is my personal scripture. So I can't let my go off the rails because otherwise I'll forfeit all of these blessings. And if you give that to a 7-8-year-old or an 11-year-old, which is what they suggested, that's very manipulative, I think.
Especially when I love, if you take nothing away from his talk, take this away. He said, if your blessing doesn't mention a specific event, it doesn't mean it won't happen. Neither is everything mentioned guaranteed to happen in this life. So at that point, what is the point of the blessing? If not everything that's in it is going to happen, and just because something isn't in it doesn't mean that won't happen, what does it actually tell you?
Yeah.
Because by that definition, anything could happen. So then what is the point of the blessing? And I think they're in a tricky spot because they've got to put that caveat in there because otherwise people are going to have unrealistic expectations. What are your thoughts, Jane and then Ruth, on the purpose of patriarchal blessings then, in light of that caveat?
I want to talk about the purpose of blessings first, because I feel like as 21st century saints, we've kind of claimed this space of giving not priesthood blessings, but blessing journeys, and by whatever authority we feel like is right in the moment as women. You see, Ruth, whenever you mentioned, giving them out at a baby blessing, they kind of almost do. After a baby's named and blessed, there's that part where if someone's writing down what is said, I would love it to be maybe a little bit more like the wishes that the good fairies give to Sleeping Beauty before she falls asleep. You will be blessed with, rather than here is what is going to happen when you do this. This will happen. I got to, I was really privileged that when our youngest came to join our family, and they had not only experienced a name change, but they also wanted to adopt our family name. So we did a blessing at home in the garden with the rest of the family. It wasn't a church thing, but we got to name and bless her. And everybody was pulled into this. It was a community blessing of the types of things we wanted our child to feel empowered by, to know about themselves. Because what we project onto other people's journeys is often really quite messed up. So we have people who are receiving patriarchal blessings, and they, maybe later down the line, the gender isn't correct, that you're not going to be a mother, you're going to be a father, or that you're choosing not to get married, or whatever that might look like. Tying it into faithfulness as well, as just super problematic, and so many people torture themselves with the patriarchal blessing that was never realized. I feel that there's a more empowering way to do that, that I don't really, I guess, want to associate with patriarchal blessings and, you know, the patriarch and the elderly person who's giving out that blessing. I am more empowered by the idea of the potential of the untapped authority that we have as a community.
Right, Ruth?
I feel like, and I say this from a place of stepping away from the church, and I get that. So for faithful members, maybe it's challenging for me to say this, but I feel that a patriarchal blessing is another one of those barriers that distances us between a relationship with us and God. So I don't need, if God wants to talk to me and tell me what he wants me to do in my life, he can talk to me. I can say a prayer and I can have the Spirit whisper to me. That's what Mormonism teaches. But here we go. Here's a patriarch. Here's an elderly man who's going to come along and act as the conduit for that relationship that I have with God. And more than that, and this is, I find, insidious, he's going to come along and tell me, break the familial ties I have with my own culture and my own lineage, and create a mythical culture and lineage tied to the tribes of Israel. Mm-hmm. I find that insidious, and it's one thing doing that 200 years ago in the wild, wild west of America. It's a very different thing going into the countries in Africa, going across the world into the Far East, going into, or wherever you can imagine in the world, going there and breaking those familial cultural ties with potentially an 11-year-old and saying, no, you're not that thing you thought you were, you're this. It screws up people's brains.
And I'm not the only person who's had to go back and get the patriarch to declare their lineage because they forgot. That should have been a red flag, right? But happened to me. It's happened to other people I know.
Well, on the lineage thing, so not just the lineage thing, I really like my patriarchal blessing. It's there. It's sweet. It doesn't have a tremendous amount of power in my life because I don't look at things in that way. I don't know, maybe at times it has. It's just another thing that was a really nice experience, and yeah, I pull it out from time to time. But I had this experience of okay, I'm not even feeling bad about this because, like many other people, many other white women of my age, we're stuck over on Pedro Pascal TikTok, and it's just nothing but. And someone asked Pedro Pascal what is his rising sign, so immediately I have to know what this is, and I'm googling to find out. I am a Virgo with rising Virgo, and apparently that means I am predisposed to having OCD. And I was like, oh, that's why. And it took me a moment to remember that it's not true. it's like, it's a thing. I was like, oh, they nailed that. And similarly, a few years ago in Sunstone, UK, we had these fantastic table favors. I can both hold my patriarchal blessing sacred and also read this scroll that tells me what my generated patriarchal blessing is. I believe I was in the house of Aerosmith, and that's the one I'm aligning with through the rest of my life. And people were horrified. Some people were horrified about the fact that we were laughing about this and we thought this was really, really great, because the generated one isn't true either. We're not guiding our lives by it. It's a thing. If you hold it sacred, that's great, but also
there's a delicious irony in the fact that it's all doing our family history and then all getting excited about the possibility of testing our DNA. It's kind of completely blown lineage of, anyway being linked to the tribes of Israel out of the water. And now it has to be symbolic, apart from those people whose patriarchal blessing said, no, you are actually definitely.
Yeah. Well, mine told me that I am, actually definitely a descendant of one of the tribes of Israel. However, my ancestry DNA results tell me I'm 2% Norwegian, and that's about as exotic as it gets. So there we are. Should we go on to Neil L. Anderson?
Yes.
And another death, because they can't seem to stop talking about people dying, but not in a productive or healthy way. They just keep going, people died, and they kind of got past it somehow by being very faithful. Thank you very much, Jacob, by the way, for the donation as a real 180. Really lovely to see you in Thrive in Zurich, and it was great to spend some time with you there. He made that out to even Nemo the Mormon, so bonus points. Neil Anderson started out with the Alma the Younger story, which again is, I don't want to say it's a trope, because it is legitimate for them to talk about that story. Like, there are things they go on about a lot, and I feel bad saying they're tropes, because they have every right to go through Mormon scripture and look at common stories and try and talk about them in a slightly different way. It just gets frustrating when they don't. And they say things like, Jesus is never in a forgotten corner because our thoughts of him are always present. Did you notice that? Our thoughts of Jesus are always present. That's legitimately what he said. I wanted to get a clip of him saying it. I didn't get a chance to do it in time. He made the biggest Freudian slip. I think he genuinely views Russell M. Nelson as Jesus. And so he said the word president instead of present.
Oh dear. I was too busy at that point concentrating on the fact that it's nobody puts Jesus in the corner, and I'm thinking Dirty Dancing. I'm waiting for Patrick Swayze to swing in and take him up on the dance floor.
Okay, so our minds went to two places. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
but
mine was higher
on,
and holy. I am sorry.
Yeah.
Mine was actually appropriately engaged. So I was bored out of my tree at this point. Conference, I don't have ADHD until conference starts, and I start to think, have I got ADHD? Why am I struggling so hard? But yeah, it's totally normal.
I survive with a packet of jammy Dodgers.
Oh,
that's how I get myself
through. Have you seen the
through.
size of my ass? Even pizza doesn't work to get me. I've tried it, believe it. Hey, listen, I got to have something to shake, but I am happy.
Oh, I'm gonna blush again, Jane. Let's not do this. Okay. Can we talk about this horrific story?
No, let's talk about my ass more. Okay, so this horrific story, before we get to the horrific story, the part where he's talking about our thoughts on Jesus being always present. This is tying back into the first talk for me, where it's this thought control. We are supposed to be constantly thinking about Jesus. At some point in our brain, Jesus should always be there. Now, there is this part of me that thinks we could so easily go to somewhere healthy with this. In the same way as I have a dog, I have a cat. I know it exists. I know that this is a relationship I have with this little creature who depends on me. I have to remember, but you don't really try to, it just kind of happens, right? To bring it to your conscious mind is how meditation, how mindfulness is supposed to work. We don't only think about one thing, and if we are just being more aware of what our thoughts look like, it's a much healthier thing than saying, okay, it's sacrament now, we're supposed to be switched on, but are you thinking about Jesus? But haven't you thought about him enough? But you should be thinking about him more. So what we're supposed to do, the way the healthy mind works, is our thought is there, it's on Jesus, and then it drifts, and then you return, and then it drifts, and then you return, and it's that constant coming back to the moment, to the thing that you are meditating on, which is a much more healthy way to look at repentance, at a life of being engaged with faith, rather than this all or nothing. You are completely thinking about Jesus all the time or not. I don't even think about my husband like that, so having to constantly drag Jesus out of a corner of my mind when Jesus is supposed to just be part of life. So that was something that I felt, just this bringing our awareness to Jesus. He was almost saying that, but he just didn't quite get to that healthy place. And then we come to this story,
and he dog whistled the temple there. All our thoughts are circumscribed in his love. which is just a little bit of a dog whistle to those that have been through the temple, by using the word circumscribe more than anything. Yeah, this story, I don't want to belabor it too long because I really want to get onto Russell M. Nelson's talk via the way of Kevin Duncan, who we'll get to in a moment. But all I really want to say about this talk, and I think then we'll move on, is just that out of all the things that have been called a miracle, up to and including a man having paperwork submitted to the church and having it accepted, miracle, this is the one thing where you could genuinely kind of put it towards the miracle camp. Coincidence, a lot of people would call it, but you could say she booked a temple session on the day that she then died, and that temple session brought comfort to her family. If you're looking for something that you could kind of try and shoehorn into the miracle department, that's more appropriate than a man with a bad past who found some community, managed to go on a mission, and isn't that a miracle? Not really. But I just don't like the way they constantly use people's deaths to say, but isn't the church wonderful? Because yes, I'm sure the temple did bring them comfort, and I'm really grateful that it did bring them comfort. But I just don't know. I don't know who this story was for, because I don't know whether it did help the sort of people that are grieving in the same way. If someone is going through that that's listening, I don't know how this story helps them other than saying, go to the temple, you'll feel better.
Well, I think that's what it's for. I think it's for the people who feel pain, and we need to get to that happy ending, and it's all okay because the temple's there. And you may feel a little bit sad some days, but and I feel bad because it's, this is a real family that he's talking about, and this is a real experience. This is where they really find comfort.
Yeah.
The problem is what you just did in the space of 2 minutes is that you rushed us through the most traumatic thing that can happen with little children, a grief that is never going to go away, and you made it all somehow okay, and it's okay to just be awful.
And the temple is gate kept, and they're basically saying, right, so if you want to get through these sorts of things, you've got to come to temple, and in order to come to temple, you've got to play by our rules. So it's not that universality of Jesus will comfort you. It's like our very specific members only club is where you need to go. That's the really cynical take in my mind. And I think the truth of it is probably not quite there, but that's where my really cynical brain goes.
Yeah.
Ruth, and then we'll go on to Kevin Duncan.
Yeah, I just found it it really minimised the pain that will be attached to losing a mother when you're a child. The last thing you care about as a child when your parents has passed away is whether or not you'll be together forever. You care about the fact that Mum's not going to be there at tea time. You care about the fact that she's not going to come and see you in the Christmas show. She's not going to be there for the dance recital. She's not going to be there when you get married. She's not going to be there when you have your first baby. Going to the temple on the day that she passed away will probably be a memory that lives with them. But how about as a grown-up, as a dad, you didn't go to the temple and you actually just spent time with your kids instead of just dragging to the temple to talk about other dead people? Because what the most they could have done was baptisms for the dead. How about just spend time with those kids and talk about Mum? And I just found it it just minimised all the pain that can be around a parent's death and sort of shoehorned it into, it's all going to be all right because we'll be together forever.
But I don't think we have the language to do it properly, Ruth, because I feel like if there was a message where the veil is so thin at the temple, if we took our kids there, and this is clearly what Mum wanted them to do, then they would have that experience of feeling somehow
close to her,
to Mum. That would be beautiful. Maybe it's the morbid part of me. I think it's the real part of me that I want to hear about the dad who is so paralyzed with grief that he couldn't move for a year, that his kids had to practically look after him, that people had to step up to make sure that they were being looked after and educated. That's what grief most often looks like. And this Mormon grief, I mean, it's so wonderful that you got to have that experience, but it is so rare and so uncommon, and that cannot be what we are striving for. Is that we have to accept all of the faces of grief and not just the ensign stories.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Kevin Duncan, and we're going to run through this at about the same pace that he ran to the pulpit. Right? Because did you see, I've been used to them all kind of doddering up to the pulpit. He went for it. He was like, I gotta be there. He was excited. And actually, he quoted Joseph Smith the most. He quoted Joseph Smith 3 times.
Yeah.
It was mad. And according to Haney, pointless. But because, as we know, the words of past prophets can't be used to disprove the words of a current prophet. So there's just no point looking at them, really. He talked about some missionary work at the Tokyo Open House. And a guy saying to him, this one may well be one of the only teachings that can unite a world so divided. He didn't say that. No one says that. It's the same as the whole, your swimsuit's so modest and yet you're so beautiful. How? No one is saying this to people. And if they are, it's just a bit weird.
They are. They bloody well are. See, you know what? Women are used to being spoken to like that. And I'm really
I hate
sorry
the
to
idea
tell you.
that
Really
anyone has ever actually said that to a woman. That is deeply distressing. I'm going to need some time to process that. The only other thing about Kevin Duncan is that temples apparently are like a game of Risk, or like one of these strategy board games where, like, as you put them places, then Satan's kind of power recedes. It's like this weird game of like Settlers of Catan or Risk with temples, and Satan loses his influence when you put like on the board. So
It's not hotels. You pop a hotel down, it's great. Yeah.
So, yeah, and if you guys have just got nothing, let's go to Russell M. Nelson, because he had everything. He said that we're constantly on his mind and in his prayers, which is great. And he starts by talking about his surgical internship. Now, we had someone in the comments earlier saying a cardiothoracic surgeon wouldn't be working on leg amputation, but if he was on an internship, he might have been working in orthopedic surgery, which is where that sort of surgery would take place, getting experience as a surgeon. So, because he said he was an intern.
Since when do we let Nelson let factual, events get in the way of a good story?
He's never been one to let factual events get in the way of a good story. And then he started talking about gangrene, and a gangrenous scalpel got thrown across the room by a surgeon in a tantrum because, that's what surgeons are like, I suppose. And it landed in his arm. Unfortunately, he didn't get infected. And then he said this.
Fault finding and evil. Even now, decades later, I find myself wondering if the contaminated scalpel that landed in my arm was any more toxic than the venomous contention that infects our civic dialogue and too many personal relationships today. Civility and decency seem to have disappeared during this era of polarization and passionate disagreements.
Brad Wilcox.
Vulgarity, fault-finding, and evil speaking of others are all too common. Too many pundits, politicians, entertainers, and other influencers throw insults constantly. I am greatly concerned that so many people seem to believe that it is completely acceptable to condemn, malign, and vilify anyone
like Jeffrey R. Holland vilified Matt Eason,
who does not agree with them. Many seem eager to damage another's reputation with pathetic and pithy barbs.
I've never been called pathetic and pithy before. I quite like that. Can that be the name of my candle? Pathetic and pithy. I think that's a great name for my candle. What did we think of that, folks?
Who was he aiming it at?
And I want to say, actually, I really want to say that I liked his talk in terms of the principle of his talk. I thought if I wanted to learn to not say nasty things to people and not give people the silent treatment and not use anger to coerce people, basically it was a talk about if you're being abusive, stop being abusive, and here's how to be nice to people. But the problem is it's full of hypocrisy. Because at every turn, the things he's telling people not to do are things that him and the other members of senior church leadership are guilty of.
Yeah.
So what are we meant to do about that? Jane?
This was the first conference where I haven't voted to sustain the prophet. I didn't anticipate that it would be more painful raising my hand to oppose than just the fact that I didn't sustain him. So I had a lot of big feelings about the fact that this is the first time I'm going to speak to him. I'm mad at him. I'm really, really mad at him. I'm mad at all of them. And it was so tough the process of doing that was awful. I voted to oppose right now. I am hoping it won't look like that forever. When he then starts speaking about being contentious, I'm rolling my eyes because we've heard contentious, but then interestingly, you know, who is this aimed at? You're talking about people who say there's a problem, and then in church, because that's what contentiousness looks like in church, not whether it's valid. But he starts talking about it in the context of abuse. Contentiousness has lots of different meanings throughout this talk. So here he's talking about control, silent treatment in the family. Oh my goodness, really, really, really important things. The microaggressions that are, I would have loved him to call it abuse, but we don't like to say the word abuse in the church, which is one of the reasons why, you know, like a safeguarding project, safeguarding is more palatable than abuse. Again, contentiousness seems to be more palatable. He then did this thing where he just went back to this is why I'm saying it was a roller coaster. He went back to, we're supposed to be peacemakers, we're supposed to be focusing on making peace, and it became this situation where contention and working with people who have experienced abuse, and also with people who have been abusive. People who have been abusive and are members of the church and still have that power and authority. Often you find they're the most religious, they're the most faithful, they're key in their ward, and they know how to talk about the gospel. They really, really love the Lord, and everyone knows about their level of faithfulness. They are not the contentious ones, right? It's going to be very difficult for someone to recognize, when I do this, I am being contentious. Because the contentious people in the church are those who report abuse, or those who say this is a problem, or those who say I am gay and there is no place for me, or if you experience any pain or discomfort, then you are being contentious. And I feel like he drifted back to that, because what you're supposed to do if you're experiencing pain or discomfort or abuse, you're supposed to make peace. You're not supposed to be looking for justice or restitution or protecting people in the future. So it became that sort of big difference for me. Then he will step up a gear to make me happy again. I'll jump to you guys.
Yeah. Ruth, because then I want to jump onto the second video clip.
So yes, so he says to be able to identify a true follower of Jesus Christ, look at how compassionately they treat other people. Well,
let's play that clip.
We're looking. Have you got that lined up?
Yeah, I've got that.
Disciples of Jesus Christ, we are to be examples of how to interact with others, especially when we have differences of opinion. One of the easiest ways to identify a true follower of Jesus Christ is how compassionately that person treats other people.
Okay, so how compassionately do they treat gay members of the church, lesbian members of the church, bisexual members of the church, transgender members of the church? How compassionately do they treat members of the church who just think differently to the conservative norm? How compassionate was Jeffrey R. Holland towards that community when he called for musket fire? How compassionate was Brad Wilcox towards other people of other faiths when he said they were just playing church? Not compassionate at all.
No.
They are not compassionate towards those that disagree with them. They're not. In no way. They say that as disciples we're to be an example of how to interact with others. So set that example and apologise, maybe, because that's how we should interact with others. Sorry, Ruth, I've gone on a bit of a rant.
No,
Please stop me.
I completely agree. And there are many, many people who happen to be members of the church who I admire, who are compassionate in themselves. It has nothing to do with their Mormonism. It's because they are a decent person. And when I look at Oakes, when I know what he did back in the 70s and 80s at BYU, when I look at Holland and I hear the rhetoric that he spouts, when I look at Brad Wilcox and I think he's in a position of authority over the youth of the church, that is not people that I want to emulate. They are not people that I would find the saviour through. They aren't people that I would want to the my wider world community to look at as an example of what what an apostle or a believer of Jesus Christ looks like. I find it despicable. And when we think about that pot of money that we know now sits in their control, that could be used with compassion to help and heal the world and make a huge difference, the fact that they're not doing anything proactive with that money is evidence of a lack of compassion, in my opinion.
Can I throw a couple of quotes from this at you, and then we'll wrap things up? So he said that we should not be caught up in our own importance. Well, I mean, the man that throws himself birthday parties of that grandeur maybe needs to take a look at that statement. He said we can model how to manage honest differences of opinion with mutual respect and dignified dialogue. So why does the church refuse to ever engage with those who disagree with them? Like, ever? I mean, let's end on that point, shall we? Because that is a key one. We can model how to manage honest differences of opinion with mutual respect and dignified dialogue. So why do they refuse to engage with people?
Yeah.
Ruth, then Jane, then we'll wrap it up.
Oh, I was just going to pat ourselves on the back and say, here we are, 21st century saints doing just that. We're modelling how to handle differences of opinion with mutual respect. We're modelling how to interact with active believing members of the church and try to guide and steer conversations around safeguarding and care and compassion. And we're doing all of that. We're not doing it because of what you're telling us. We're doing it because we're human beings and we care about people. So yeah, I'd love them to do it. I'd be so impressed. I'd sing it from the rafters if they did that.
Absolutely. Jane?
This was as close to the talk I wanted on abuse. I needed the prophet to call it abuse. The level of what is happening just now in the church is horrific. I wish you had have been more forthright and more specific. There is this part in his talk where he says, this message, you might be thinking this message would help someone you know. How endearing was that? Because it did remind us to look inward on it. The part about modeling conversations is the thing that I would love to be the takeaway from this, along with the wording about abusive situations, because we don't see that in church, and we can have these conversations and they can be empowering and safe without having to apologize that you're going to offend the TBM or offend the person who's left the church. Saying that walking on eggshells people don't have to walk on eggshells around you. The other thing was this line where he says, we rebuke the adversary every time we heal a misunderstanding, which is exactly what fact-checking does, which is exactly what speaking out about abuse does. I do want to do a shout out, if it's okay, just quickly.
Yeah,
we
sure.
have a petition we're asking for people to come forward about their experiences of abuse. And if you would like to do that anonymously, we have a petition. You can find it 21stcenturysaints.org, and we have managed already to keep people safe because of people who are coming forward and using that tool. It's completely confidential. So yeah, you rebuke the adversary when you heal a misunderstanding.
So
I love that.
I think I'm doing my best to heal misunderstandings by putting the truth forward. The church could do the same. I want to say the full quote, and thank you to Colby for his lovely donation here. I want to share that full quote. Lay aside bitterness. Cease insisting that it is your way or no way, and it's time to stop doing things that make people walk on eggshells around you. If that does not describe the current attitudes of many members of the church, then I don't know what does, including some of those senior brethren. I know that you have to walk on, personally, I know you have to walk on eggshells around them. The moment you seem to offend their sense of their excellence, then they get very upset with you. I know from personal experience. So, with all that said, I loved his talk. I thought it was some great points. I would just love to see the leaders of the church enact what they're teaching. If that talk wasn't so replete with hypocrisy, I wouldn't have been so upset. But that's what bothered me. So I've got about 25 minutes now to go get some food. And then the next session starts. And then I'll be there after that one with the lovely Peter Bleakley, joined at the end for a recap by the lovely Priesthood Dispatches. We're going to look at where the new temples are. And actually, me and Priesthood Dispatches are going to be on his channel watching the temples come out live. And we're going to plot them on a map. It's going to be great fun. So go over to his channel in about 2.5 hours, more or less, just under. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Take care. Like, comment, subscribe. I sound like James May. Have a great evening. See you in about 2 hours. Bye-bye.